A very, very happy Sunday afternoon, evening to you. Hopefully everybody is well. Hopefully you are at your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual health this Sunday, and hope you are able to maintain your balance in the midst of all of the challenges that you are having to face in your life. And we're happy that you have decided to join us today and spend this hour with us. Today on Our Ancestors' Voices, we will be finalizing the last chapter of my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. And it says chapter 7, but it's actually chapter 8. So apologize for that. But it's the last chapter of the book, and the conclusion is the title of it. And so we'll be doing that. And we want to start, as we always do, by giving thanks and acknowledgement to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And so that there's no confusion, we're talking about the American Indian people and their descendants, the Chicanos, the Latinos, the Mexicanos, however those folks choose to identify themselves. The point is, this is their land. So whatever they call themselves, if they call themselves Chicanos, then this is Chicano land. If they call themselves Mexicanos, this is Mexicano land. If they call themselves American Indian people, it's American Indian land. And if you're not from those communities, it's not your land. So that's the main point. And so we acknowledge their struggle for justice and human dignity. And we, of course, honor the struggle of our African ancestors. You know, CLR James, that great struggler for justice from the Caribbean, said it so perfectly. And he was the author of the great book, Pan-African Slave Revolts, which documents over 300 revolts our ancestors carried out from the eastern shores of Africa all the way over to the western shores of the Western Hemisphere. And CLR James was quoted as saying that the only place that our ancestors did not fight back was in the pages of capitalist history books. And that is such an accurate statement. because a lot of you and a lot of us have been trained to believe that we just turned the other cheek and we didn't fight back. And, you know, people think that that's the dominant narrative of our history. That's the dominant narrative our enemies have wanted to convince you is our history. So we're honored that our ancestors fought back every step of the way, and they are the reason that we're here. And we're glad to close out reviewing this book. We're humbled at the number of people who have bought the book. It's selling in the thousands, in the high thousands, it's selling. And that's a wonderful thing. And working with so many people all over the world and helping organize. I just sent a packet to some people in the Caribbean who wanted the book and wanted to organize around it. So doing a lot of that, and just honored and thankful to be able to do it. And today we'll take you through this last chapter of what that book means. And so before we begin, we'll do as we always do. We'll go through our introductions, and we'll say that Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. It's an organization that sponsors this weekly program. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party based in Africa. Our objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa. One unified socialist Africa. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, which is displayed in the upper right hand on your screen there. And that book outlines the strategy to unite all Pan-African revolutionary forces on the ground in Africa. And that is the work that we engage in every day to build one worldwide fighting force to achieve Pan-Africanism, because we believe that until Africa is free, no African anywhere on earth will ever be free. That the key to our freedom is Pan-Africanism. And it's also a major contributor to the struggles of all oppressed people on the planet. And so our program, Our Ancestors' Voices, is hosted by APRP organizers and father-daughter, myself and my daughter Shukura, who, as it says, are both active organizers within the APRP and working to help us build our objective of revolutionary Pan-Africanism, which we believe is African people's contribution to the struggle for justice all over the world. So we're glad that you can join us here today. And to get us started, I'll turn it over first to Shukura.
Greetings, everyone. Happy Sunday. Hope you are in your best physical and mental spaces to be in. We are so excited to talk to you about the closure of this book, as we really feel and believe that this particular manifesto is not just a guideline and a framework, but it is a practical way for you to execute organizing within your communities. So we truly hope that in the next 8 slides, you can pick up more information on how to go about taking the steps that you need to take to develop community defense. The first point I want to address is that we need to keep in mind that with community defense, it's all about revolutionary work, which means it's all about designing the masses of people so that we all can be against capitalism, okay? So community defense contributes to the revolution, just like you would if you wanted to go to the batting cages. You would need community defense to yield revolution, just like you would need baseballs or softballs if you were going to the batting cages, right? Like in theory, yes, you could go practice your swing without hitting an object known as a ball. But the whole purpose that majority of people go to batting cages is to do what? Hit balls, right? So we need community defense to equal our revolution, just like a person wanting to practice at the batting cages would need a ball to hit. If you don't go to the batting cages, then maybe you're familiar with wearing a life vest when you learned how to swim. You need a life vest to learn how to swim, just like you need community defense to help us reach revolution and to help us organize and come together. So these are just some very small but practical real life examples that we wanted to share with you to help you understand that it's really not up for discussion. We need community defenses, just like we need oxygen, okay? And so the next point I want to help us understand is that the whole purpose of this book was to help connect consciousness of Africans everywhere, not just in the United States. More often than not, this particular Western hemisphere that we identify and live with, or really we live with, excuse me, we shouldn't identify with it because we're not Americans, but this Western hemisphere that we live in, it teaches us every single day that we need to adopt the lifestyles here and just exist here and accept that this is all there is. And we should not want to achieve anything more. We should just deal with what we have. When in actuality, Pan-Africanism is the answer. We don't have to accept, we don't have to settle. Okay. Pan-Africanism is the answer. But that means that the whole continent of Africa would have to reach a socialist ideology. So we need to research and understand what socialism is. We can't rely on media to tell us what socialism is. So you can't go to Wikipedia to learn about socialism. You need to be in an organization that is doing socialist work. And I actually brought this up with my dad. I said, yeah, one of my friends, they're a socialist. And my dad said, what organization are they in? And I thought to myself, well, they're a part of my labor union. And he was like, well, that's something, but not really. Like they should be in a socialist organization if they are in fact a socialist. And I thought to myself, I'll have to ask this person if they are involved in another organization besides our union, because maybe that's something I'm not familiar with. So, if you're a socialist, that means you're practicing it every single day, right? You don't just take off your socialist hat when you leave that organization's meeting and then you become a capitalist, right? You're a socialist 9 times out of 10, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 385 a year, not 365, but you die a socialist because that's your principle. That's what you believe in. And we've already given a seminar on how important it is to be married to your principles. So we know that we're not going to talk about that today, but we know that if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for anything. And we also know that if you don't have any values yourself, then that means the same system that oppresses you can tell you who you are. And we already know how dangerous and traumatizing that can be. So we don't need capitalism to tell us who we are. We know that we identify as socialists because we believe that every person deserves humanity and respect and deserves oxygen, water, clothing, whatever else they need to exist on this planet, as long as they are contributing members to the planet. They can't just take from the planet. They need to give something back as well. So be in an active organization that's promoting and applying socialist values to the world. Make sure that, we all have to think about how once Africa is able to reach its socialist state, then that means Africans everywhere will have a different beat to march to. I don't know if you all have ever really stopped to think about what is the basis of why we are oppressed as Africans, but a lot of it stems from us not having the agency and the advocacy to determine how our resources that come from our motherland are used. And so once we all become socialists, because Africa will then be operating on a different level, not exploitation anymore, that's going to change how we get treated in this world. That's going to change how we make decisions on how the resources continue to be spent from Africa. And that means our perception is going to change. And then I think for some of us, we can't imagine what a world would be like when we actually have ownership of Africa. And I know that's a hard concept for some of us to think about because you've been exploited all your life. So you don't really know any other way. I understand that. That would be like having a pet hamster and never taking the hamster out of the cage ever. And then the one day that you accidentally leave the cage door open, the hamster is not even sure if they want to exit the cage because they've never walked in your house before without the protection of that cage. So I understand that can be scary to some of you, but by the same token, if you're already oppressed now and you already know what it's like to be harassed when you're driving because you are quote unquote DWB or driving while African, and you already know what it's like to be harassed when you walk into a store and the security guard is following you, making all these assumptions based on what you're going to do when you get in the store. If you already know what it means to be harassed because you're walking by and someone is staring at you in a very disrespectful manner, then what's the alternative? And don't you want something better from what you're already experiencing, which is obviously not good? So it can't really get too much worse besides your life being taken before you have a chance to speak up for yourself. So I would encourage you, if you are scared because you're not sure what the future would hold once Africa does regain control, then at least do some research on what some other neighboring countries have done, like Cuba and other examples, to help us see that it is possible. Research Ghana. Research what Ghana was like before it reached its independence, and research how much work, not just Nkrumah, but all of the Ghanaians had to do to get their power back and to get the colonists to walk on out of that country. Research that, because this is not a new concept that we're just introducing in 2021. It's been done time and time again. And as we know, the timelines have a way of recycling themselves. So let's think about that. The last point I'll make for this slide is we want to make sure we understand that community defense, by definition, is something that debunks capitalism and takes all of capitalism's power away, and instead ignites, fuels, and gives all power to socialist construction. So, that means that we need to stop relying on tools that are coming from the oppressive system to deal with problems that we're facing. So my dad has already mentioned, we can't use tools from an oppressive system, such as calling the police. We have to figure out another way, you all. And I complain to my dad and my mom all the time about my neighbors, but I would never in a million years think to call the police, because that's not how I was raised. I always try to have conversations with them. When I first adopted my dog was barking uncontrollably. And I went to all my neighbors, knocked on their doors and said, hey, I just want you to know I have this new family member. I'm in the process of training this person. Well, I do see her as a person, but this dog, I'm in the process of training her to not be so loud, or at least not be so loud in the wee hours of the morning or really late at night when I know you all are going to sleep. I'm just asking for your patience. She is 7 months old and I just adopted her. So we're still developing our life together. And I'm just hoping you can be patient with me. And in many cases, the neighbors that I talk to, as we've already said, not only did they understand because they felt like I was respecting them and trying to treat them with respect, but they had toddlers that are up screaming at way hours of the night, or they have fights with their partners in way late hours of the night. So, no one is perfect, and everybody understood I was trying to have a humanist approach. So I'm just saying, that's why we can't rely on the oppressive system to solve our problems. We need to take matters into our own hands and just treat people the way we would want to be treated, but be honest about what we want. Don't just, try to be passive aggressive, but just be real about what it is your intentions are. If it's starting an organization in that community, be honest about that. If it's asking your neighbor to be patient with you because your dog is being potty trained and you're learning how to not let the dog bark as much, be honest about that. Transparency is always the best measure, because at the end of the day, we can't be free and we can't be organized if it's built on lies. That's how we got in the mess we're in now, because the same system that's oppressing us used that same ideology and methodology. So let's learn from them and understand not to do that again. In addition to not calling the police, we need to remember we can't rely on judicial systems. We can't rely on judges. We can't expect judges to not send our African people to jail. That's what they're designed to do. That's probably the first class they take in law school, is how to send Africans to jail. I don't know. I'm just being facetious, but you all know what I'm saying. These are realistic things that have been happening since the beginning of time, at least since I've been alive. That's the only life I've known. So I'm not going to trust anything that I have in the same system that has continuously let me down, continuously. We cannot expect people to respect us just because Kamala's in office. That means nothing. We're still not getting respected. Africans are still being shot down. People are still being attacked, not just in America, but all throughout the world. So clearly that person's positionality in office has nothing to do with our level of respect the society is giving us. And we certainly can't allow our children to learn anything from these school systems where curriculums are tainted in white supremacy and built on capitalist imperialist structures. We cannot expect our children to walk away any stronger than they are if we do not continually give them a secondary education in addition to what they're experiencing for 6 hours a day. As my parents used to say when I was growing up, we cannot let school interfere with your education. And I would encourage us to just continue to remember that the whole purpose of this school system is to protect, promote, and perpetuate, alliteration on purpose, capitalism and imperialism. So do not for once be fooled about that, which means if you are anti-capitalist, then you need to understand that when you send your child to a public educated school. Next slide, please. All right. So with the first point, you all, we have to remember that this is a toolkit. This is a practical guideline on how we can go about reaching a revolution where Africans are no longer being attacked and that we are finally free. So my dad used to have a license plate that was a translation in Portuguese. And the term in Portuguese was a luta continua. And I remember I asked him one day, what does that mean? And so he gave me the translation where in English, roughly, it means the struggle continues. So we understand that this manifest that my dad has written is only adding on to what Nkrumah has already given us tools to understand. We know that our ancestors would want us to keep moving forward. We also know they would want us to keep working. They would not be satisfied with the current conditions that we are facing. They would not be content. They would be outraged and they would want us to keep going because things were so much worse when they were up and coming, and they were extremely outraged then. They were peed off then, and they knew that until Africa was free, we would all continue to suffer. So if they understood that, 40 something years ago, 60 something years ago, 100 something years ago, depending on when they were on this planet, then we know that we need to keep moving forward. We have to think about the people that are coming behind us that haven't even been born yet, and how much they deserve to not be harassed and mistreated by police officers. We have to think about that. It's not just about us. And it's not about where we are currently right now. It's about future generations, 20, 50 years from now. It's about those people and the respect that they deserve. We don't need to be complacent. We have to remember that there's something else that can happen. We have the power. We are the ones we've been waiting for. But that means starting an organization or joining an organization. You cannot do this by yourself. You'll be burned out within the first 12 hours. I guarantee you will. So you shouldn't want to do it by yourself. And you should know that we are here and we should work together. Like anything else, you do much better when you're in larger numbers. So we have to remember that we can't accept and we can't settle. And also, if we accept and if we settle, then we're completely disrespecting the indigenous people and our own ancestors, because that means that we're not getting out of the indigenous people's way. And my dad just reminded us that this is their land. They have a right to have their land back, and we need to go. We can't be here anymore. So we have to think about how much our choices are impacting other people as well. The second point I'll talk about is we have to think about how this book is literally lighting a path. Like if you've ever been on an airplane and the lights are out, the path is lit, right? So this book is lighting a path. I want you all to think about a time when you researched something or read something to learn a new skill. And in learning that new skill, it helped you to do something different with your life. So for example, if you wanted to learn how to cornrow someone's hair, maybe you were trying to read a book or watch a YouTube video to learn how to do that. Or maybe you were trying to learn how to start a business and you were trying to read a book or watch a YouTube video to figure out how to do that. For me, I haven't owned a dog in over 10 years. So yes, I bought a bunch of books on how to be a responsible pet owner because I wanted to make sure I did everything I could, especially because the pet industry has changed in the last decade. They now have microchips. They didn't have that the last time I had a dog. So my point is, if you pick up the time to read and research things to learn how to cornrow and to learn how to start businesses and to learn how to be a pet owner, then why would picking up the manifesto to learn how to organize and get rid of oppression be any different? It would be the same thing. If you've never organized before, if you've never been in an organization before, then that's not a skill that you have. And that's not a bad thing. That just means you need to practice it. That means you need to build on it. Just like you would cornrowing someone's hair, or just like you would practicing being a good pet parent, right? So we're just thinking about that as it relates to being feasible. We're remembering that we want to eradicate our ignorance, which basically means just not having information. So we want to get information, which means we should pick up this book and read it and then discuss it with other people, share dialogues around it, break down parts that didn't make sense to us, and have more conversation dialogues around this book. The last and final point I'll make, and then I'll pass it back over to my dad, is it's very simple, you all. Until the masses of people are organized, we will not have a feasible mechanism for African people anywhere to be free. You have to think about if you've ever eaten a 7-layer bean dip. Now, just stay with me. I know you're like, what is she talking about? Just stay with me. If you've ever eaten a 7-layer bean dip, you cannot eat the lowest layer without first dipping into the first 6 layers. If you've ever helped someone move, or if you yourself have ever moved and you used a U-Haul or some type of Penske truck or something to help transport your items, then you know that there is a strategy on how you load up the U-Haul or truck, meaning you don't put the small coffee table in first. What do you put in first? If you have a mattress or a bed frame, something of that large stature, you would put those items in first. And then you build into that by putting all the smaller items in after the biggest item has been put in. Why am I giving you this analogy? Because this analogy relates very much to the third point that we see on the slide. We have to remember, you all, that accessing the mattress with the smaller furniture in the truck first is impossible. Just as we would need to remove the smaller pieces to get the mattress, we have to remember that if one of us is serving as an injustice, then it's going to make it very hard for the rest of us to be free. We all have to be free, meaning we all have to remove everything out of the truck, and we all have to agree we can't support capitalism, we can't support imperialism, and we want Africa to be free. And if Africa is free, then Africans everywhere will be free. It's very, very simple. And so that requires a strategy. And this book is the guideline to help us do that. So let's use the material that is in the book. It's practical for a reason, because it can be happening. It can be done. It's possible. I'm living proof of it. And I know I'm an anomaly to some people, but I legit read this book and I'm like, this is very well written, because it allows for a person who's never organized ever, or somebody like me who's been in organizations for about 6 or 7 years, both on two different parts of the spectrum, to still see the reality and what they're doing. It's feasible beyond measure. Now, it's going to require effort, time, and energy, of course. And it's probably going to require some money. If you truly believe in the cause, then you will put your money up to it. But what else would you invest money in? You invest money in gym memberships. You invest money in car insurance. You invest money in adopting dogs. We invest money in things that are important to us. And I use the word invest on purpose. So let's invest in helping each other be revolutionized and be free, y'all, because we can do it. None of us deserve to be treated unfairly just because we're poor, just because we're women identifying, just because we're non-binary. None of those things matter. We all deserve humanity and respect. Join an organization working for justice, and I look forward to talking with you all soon. Thank you.
Ashe, ashe, ashe. And so we're just going to keep it going. And since this chapter, again, is the last chapter of the book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, we're going to talk now about some of the takeaways that the last chapter, the conclusion or the summary, talks about. What are some of the takeaways that we want you to leave with in understanding the point of this book? You know, what is it trying to say? And the first one we'll say is, it's very important that we figure out how we can raise the bar on this question of organization. Because right now, there are too many people who don't think organization is necessary. And there are actually a lot of people, the anti-organization is normalized. Like, people actually have no qualms about making anti-organization statements in public. Like, I don't need to belong to no organization. Organizations aren't the answer, blah, 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 blah. And I don't care what you say or what you hear people say or what anybody says. The one irrefutable fact about organization is what Shukura alluded to. Not any one of us can solve the problems of the planet on our own. None of us can do that. Nobody can dispute that. And if you can dispute it, I would be overwhelmingly happy to have you prove me wrong by you solving the problem by yourself. And the reason why that's not going to happen is because we all know that none of us individually can solve the problem. So as a result, the only other way to look at it is that we have to work together as human beings to come up with answers to solve these problems. So that's organization. And then the other tactic that's used to discredit organization is to attempt to discredit how organizations have functioned or what they've been able to accomplish. And, you know, that's just dishonest when people try to do that. And some of you might try to do that. But if you do, it's you're being dishonest. You're lying. And the reason why I say that is because everything in life is a struggle. That's the nature of dialectics. Everything is positives and negatives, and it's a struggle for domination. That's just the universal law of life. So, you don't get in a relationship with someone or meet somebody and it doesn't go well, and then you just never do it again. You did that when you were 17, and then now you're 50. Well, I haven't been in a relationship since I was 17 because I dated somebody for 2 months and it didn't work out. So I just wrote off relationships for the rest of my life. Or I had a job, I had a way to earn a living, and I did it for 6 months and it didn't work out. So I just have never tried to earn a living since. I've just basically just ate scraps off the sidewalk. Clearly you get my point that we understand that life is about struggle. And so things don't go well the first time. That doesn't release us from the responsibility to do them if there are things that need to be done. Instead, we have to figure out what lessons were learned from what went wrong so that we could correct those errors and forge forward. So it doesn't have to be an official organization. You should have a mission statement. You should have, because these are the things that provide you the vision as to what you're doing. But if you prefer to do it, so 5 or 6 of you get together and you just decide what you're going to do and you do it, guess what, you all? That's an organization. So we have to eliminate this anti-organization bias that people have. And a lot of this is based in the individualism that's shoved down our throats by the capitalist system. And we have to figure out ways to constantly challenge that, because that approach is not going to work in terms of providing us with the forward motion that we need. And clearly the people in power understand that, because you can't point to any facet of this capitalist imperialist network that's not organized. The imperialist militaries in the US, Britain, France, Germany, etc., organized. The international intelligence agencies that sabotage humanity, whether it's the US Central Intelligence Agency, the Israeli Mossad, the British M15, the French intelligence, whichever one you talk about, they're all extremely organized. In fact, they're so organized that a lot of those intelligence agencies and those militaries are now training the domestic police departments in terms of lessons and tactics and equipment and repression. So they're all doing that in conjunction with each other in uniform. They are organized for one thing, to oppress the masses of humanity. So they don't go, the Israeli Mossad or the CIA, they don't show up one day late, 2 hours, not prepared, and then don't come for 2 weeks, and then show up 2 weeks later and out 20 minutes late, not prepared. They come every day prepared to wipe us out. And we really believe that we're going to be able to mount an effective challenge against these people by showing up whenever the hell we want to, being prepared whenever the hell we want to be prepared, doing whatever the hell we want to do, and not doing what's necessary to prepare ourselves to fight the enemy in a way that we can win. So I don't care what you say, you cannot produce a logical and realistic argument that devalues the necessity for organization. The second takeaway is that the only true solution to all our problems is figuring out a method to engage the masses in our struggle. And individualism, man, it's a problem, because people just have been conditioned, programmed, remote control programmed to believe that you by yourself are better equipped to address the challenges in life than linking up with others and working together with them to do that. You know, people really believe, I would argue the majority of people listening right now believe that, because that's the dominant propaganda mechanism of the capitalist system. And I don't care if I'm a socialist, I'm a revolutionary, you can say all that and still believe in a dominant, individualistic, ideological, and practical approach to walking through the world. That's entirely possible. And in fact, if you're one of those people Shukura talked about, who says, I'm a socialist, I'm a revolutionary, but you're not in a socialist party organization, then that's proof that you're one of those folks. Because how are you going to be a socialist and you're not involved in an organization that's fighting to make socialism a reality? That just means, that's like you saying, I'm a family man and you've never been in any kind of relationship with anybody else to form family. Yeah, you might in your mind think, yeah, I believe in family, but you have never done a single thing to actually make it happen. So you really don't even understand what's necessary to make it happen. So that's the same with this struggle for liberation. If you're not involved in social justice organizations, in revolutionary organizations, socialist organizations, even so-called progressive organizations that aren't revolutionary, then you do not understand what's necessary to move us forward. You think you do, but it's just a question of what Kwame Ture said. You in capitalism, people don't think, they react to stimuli. That's what's happening. If you're not engaged in the process, that is what's happening. You're simply reacting to stimuli. There's no other way around it. You can't claim to know something about something and you haven't participated in it. You can't claim to know what a socialist is and you've never participated in organizing for socialism. It's not possible. That's why that's why, like Shukura gave the example. First, if I'm a socialist, I'm like, well, what's your socialist organization? Well, I don't have one. Then you're not a socialist. It doesn't just matter what's in your head. You're not a socialist. You have to be involved in the process to qualify to be a, so that's the equivalent of, if I started talking now about giving birth, all of you who have birthed a child, you would think that I was out of my mind, because how could I talk about delivering a child? I've never experienced it. I don't know anything about it. And you would be absolutely correct. And if I was standing here talking authoritative, arguing with you and you've delivered children, you would say that dude is out absolutely insane. Well, guess what? That's how we look at you when you talk about organization, when you talk about whether socialism can happen or not, and you've never been in an organization, you've never been in a socialist organization. To us, you don't know what you're talking about. You're just talking based on some stimuli you receive. You know, I had a woman the other day, she told me, well, African people have more scholarships just because of your race. That's what she said to me. And I said, well, that's not true. You don't know what you're talking about. I mean, and I said, I wish you would stop talking, because, you know, ignorance gives me a headache when I hear it. And I don't really want to have a headache right now. She's like, well, you're being rude to me. And I'm like, well, you're being rude because you're standing there as a white woman telling me that my people get scholarships. What are the names of the scholarships? That all we have to do is apply, and because of our color, we get all this money. What are the names of those scholarships? Tell us the names of those scholarships, that's all we have to do, because that's what her argument was. And I'm like, I've participated in that process, so I know that's not true. You know, there's any scholarship, even a $500 scholarship, you always have requirements. You have to write essays, you have to do things, you have to be selected, you have to qualify to win. There's nobody giving away free money anywhere. That's a lie. That's a right-wing, racist, capitalist lie. But that's what happens in this society. So, you know, this person has no idea what they're talking about, so I'm not going to listen to that. So we have got to understand that it's the masses of people that make history. And the only way that happens is we have to be engaged with each other. There just isn't any way around that. And there's just no workaround, no shortcut, no easy path to freedom for our liberation. And everybody seems to be convinced that they have to figure out how to find some kind of shortcut. And for a lot of people, the shortcut means, well, I'll just do this for me and my family. And the problem with that is, I'll just do this, like I'll just take care of my family. That's what I'll do. And the reason why that's an issue is because whatever resources you have to take care of your family, they don't belong to just you and your family. Those resources were provided to you by the sacrifices of the masses of the people. Whatever you have, whatever job you have, you couldn't have had it. If you're a woman, if you're a colonized person, if you're LGBTQ, you couldn't have that. The only reason why you have it, if you're working class white man, you couldn't have it. The only reason why you have any of that you have is because someone got their head split open so that you could have the opportunity to get it. So whatever you have today, it does not personally belong to you. You cannot just decide you want to use it for yourself and your family and nothing else. that is a sellout to humanity when you take that position. And I know people don't want to hear that. We're not here to tell you what you want to hear. That's the truth. You cannot refute that. It does not belong to you. And the people who made that sacrifice made it knowing they would not benefit from the sacrifice they were making. So you are the lowest element of human existence on the planet Earth when you betray their sacrifices just because we don't have the courage to stand up and do what's right. And that's irrefutable, y'all. So more takeaways. True progress for us is gonna have to require changes in how we approach our day-to-day lives if we wish to change things. You know, a lot of us, we think that just because we say something and we put on a front, that's all we have to do. And the proof is in the pudding. Like if you're not really seriously evaluating your life and what happens in your life and how you can make some kind of contribution towards mass liberation, then you're not serious about changing anything. And that contribution isn't just you reading books, or isn't just you contributing $5 a month for an NAACP membership or whatever you're doing. Those are all great things to do, but that is not going to change the material conditions we face. The only thing that's going to do that is we all have to start working on a consistent basis. I'm not here to tell you what your work would look like. That's the whole point of the book if you read it. Nobody in there is telling you have to do this for this route for it to be legitimate. The whole point of it is you have got to do something, and it can't just be you alone. And you got to decide what that is. It could be 5 hours a week. It could be 20 hours a week, whatever. That's up to you, but you have got to do something. That's what that's saying. And it's going to require you to change some priorities, change some philosophical approaches. You have got to make those changes. If you're still basically living your life today the same way you did 5, 10 years ago, when you weren't even thinking about the struggle for justice, then there's something really wrong with that. And you got to evaluate that. And when I say change, I'm not talking about the things you're talking about. We're talking specifically about the things that we're doing. That has to change. The things that we're doing has to change. All of us, that's true. There is nobody here that does not apply to. The things that we're doing have to change. We have to figure out ways to step up the bar. And we have to figure out ways to do that collectively. That's critical that we work on that. And then the core of the book is based in that concept of raising the bar, separating the talk for talk's sake from action designed to make progress. Now, people say stuff to me all the time about what they're doing, and I don't say anything to people, you know, because people have to figure it out on their own, you know, on their own pathway. Like I'm not here to preach to people and tell them what they should be doing. I'm here to struggle with folks who want to struggle with, but most of the time, people are doing that because they want to give the impression that they're making a contribution. They're really not that concerned about making an actual contribution. They just want to be perceived as people making a contribution. And people that are at that point are just not serious enough yet to really get involved in making real change. So it wouldn't, in my view, do any good to try to argue with those folks. It's just, you got to understand that you're not fooling anybody who's actively involved in the struggle for justice when you do that. Because there's certain things that you're going to do when you're involved in the struggle for justice. And the way folks move tells us who's really serious and trying to make a contribution and who's just talking about it. So we've got to understand that. Like, that gets back to the first point here. It's about changing some things in your life and making a commitment to place yourself outside of your comfort zone. That's a very difficult thing to do. But until we start to do that on a consistent level, we're never going to be able to make the progress that we all say we want to see us make. And then think about this book as the point in a particular meeting, right? And if people have done all this work that they want to always try to make people believe they've done, then you've been in these meetings. right? You've been in these organizing meetings. And what happens in the meeting? When you're talking about the problems, everybody's got a lot to say, right? Everybody's got an opinion. Well, I think we should be doing this. And why isn't that happening? And how come we can't do that? And how come they haven't made that happen? Everybody in the world knows how to talk like that. But when you get to the point in the meeting where you're like, okay, well, we want to engage in this action to address the problem, who is going to take assignments to do A? Who's going to take assignments to do B? Now, if you've participated in this work, you know that's always the point in the meeting where everything breaks down. Now nobody's got anything to say. And it's actually at this point to me, that's, well, you know what, I gotta go. You know, that's when that starts happening. I gotta go. Okay. And so basically what happens is that the meetings turn into counseling sessions, not even good counseling sessions, just counseling sessions where people are venting about how they feel about the problem, but nothing ever gets done because nobody really was serious about coming there to take assignments to do work to address the problem. And they're not serious because really they don't really believe that the problem can be addressed by us. And so this is where we're at. This is where the work is. This is the work that we have to do, because the first thing we have to do is get people to believe that we can solve these problems. And so this book is really saying at that point in the meeting, this is where we need to take hold and have real focus and figure out how we can build real organizers who are dedicated to going out and doing real work on a consistent basis. And it's not going to be easy. You know, somebody asked me earlier this week, it was a great compliment. They came to me and they said, you know, you're somebody I respect because you tell the truth no matter what I've seen you. You tell the truth no matter what the consequences are. And so I want to ask you, like, what does that mean to do that? And I said, well, when you make a decision to try to live your life based on principle, then you just have to be prepared to be constantly gaslit, because when you do that, people aren't going to say, you know what, you're right, I need to change my behavior. Instead, they're going to say you're picking on them. This happens to me all the time. You're picking on them. You know, people, abusers. I've challenged them, like, you're an abuser. It needs to stop. Now, you know, they go tell other people, well, I'm picking on them. And a lot of you out here, the reason why that works is because you're a coward too. So when they come to you and tell you that, like, you don't say, well, oh, that doesn't make sense. Ahjamu doesn't do that. I got to ask you what you're doing. You don't do that. Yeah, I know. Yeah. And then you go tell someone else, you know, Ahjamu's picking on this person. So you actually prepare, you're just as bad as the person who started it. You know, if people come to me, the first thing I tell them is, did you talk to that person? I'm not talking about nobody that's not here. You know, and I'll even tell them, if I don't respect them, I'll tell them, like, I have a hard time really honestly believing anything you say. So, you know, I'm not the right person to talk to. You know, and I think that if we all did that, we would be so much farther along, because toxicity breeds in this environment of liberalism. And this environment of liberalism is what you're doing when you know somebody is behaving in a way they're not supposed to be behaving in. And because you don't want to deal with the conflict of that, you just pretend like it's not happening and don't do anything or say anything about it. That's a major toxicity. Cannot exist without that. It can't exist without that. So that's what I'm saying. It's like, I'll tell you, when I've worked at the job I work at for years, but I transferred from one union local in Oregon down to the local I work for here in California. And when I first came here, you know how these jobs do, like, they lie. So they had a retreat, and they were like, we want to hear honest feedback. Well, I know they're lying, but I'm not going to lie. You know, I'm going to be who I am. So I said all these things in there. They were valid things. Everybody acknowledged they were valid. But because they had this culture there where, like, you didn't really say anything to offend certain people in power, I had so many people coming to me and they were like, you know, you got to be careful what you say. And I was new, so I didn't say a lot. You know, I'd only been there like a month or two, couple of months. So I didn't say a lot. But everybody that did that to me, I kind of lost respect for them right there, because I'm like, okay, this person is not They ain't really serious, And then now as time went on, people begin to understand, like, and I begin to explain to people, like, I'm not going to be a go along to get along person. If that's what you do, if you prostitute yourself for a job and you hold yourself out for a job and immediately abandon your principles for a paycheck, then that's what you do. But I'm never going to do that. I never have, and I never will. And I have always had a paycheck, a good one, because what I learned is that nobody else is going to respect you until you respect yourself. So that's what this point is saying, is that we have to raise the bar, you all. We've got to raise the bar, and we've got to create a culture where it becomes unacceptable for people to come in meetings and talk all about the problems, and then when it gets time to talk about solutions, they don't have any time. We got to start calling people out on that and talking, not cussing them out, calling them out. Like, how is it you had all that input there, but now you got to go? Well, when is a good time when we can come and talk about solutions that you're going to have time to do that? Because it's criminal for you to come in here and take up all that space talking about problems, but then you have no intention of helping us do anything to solve them. What is wrong with talking to people like that? Nothing. That's exactly what we need to do. And that's what this book is talking about. That's exactly what it's talking about. So the things that you can do today to, really build on what we're trying to build in this book is that, again, are you in an organization? Whatever way you define that, 2 or more people working for a common objective, are you doing that? Are you doing that? It's an easy question. The answer is either yes or no. And if the answer is no, then shut up and find an organization that is working to solve the problem. Stop running your mouth. We're not interested in hearing you. All you're doing is intellectual masturbation. You don't even believe enough in what you're saying for you to engage in work to bring it about. So why the hell would I want to listen to you? I don't want to hear that. So stop talking and find some people to work with. That's what you have to do. And if you can't find an organization that fits your fancy, then start I was shutting up before, but now I'm organizing organization and organize for justice. There's no way around that. Otherwise, we have to create a culture where you don't feel comfortable talking, because that's really what we need to move towards. We got too many people running their mouths and ain't doing nothing. And talking down efforts of people who are genuinely making sacrifices. That's criminal. So we have to create those kind of conditions. We've got to get people. And if you are in an organization, then you've got to figure out how to make sure your organization is engaged in a number of critical things that if they aren't doing, you're not really organizing anything. You got to have this independent political education going on. It's got to be consistent. Everyone has to be participating in it. You've got to have democratic centralism functioning, whatever you call it. You got to have a process to ensure that everybody's voice is heard on everything, and that once that happens, you have a mechanism for decision making, so you continue to move forward. You can call it democratic centralism. You don't want to call it that. Whatever you want to call it, you got to have that process. You got to have criticism, self-criticism, where you can have an honest assessment process, because everything we're conditioned to do is in the interest of the capitalist system. So if we don't figure out a way so that we can identify that, so we can correct it, we'll never move forward. So you got to have all of those things functioning in your organization. And if you don't have those things functioning, then I'm wondering what kind of organization you have and what kind of organizing you're doing. That's the first thing for this slide. The second thing that has to happen is, like we said, you got to have, just breaking it down a little further, you got to have that political education. You can start it off small. Like groups that I'm going with now, we're just reading articles, 2-3 page articles. We didn't start them off with 500-page books. We should be able to do that, but we're just not at that point. People don't read. They don't read. And nobody's going to be honest and say, you know what, my reading comprehension is not that good. I don't read, I don't understand words, so that's why I don't do it. People aren't going to say that, even though that's what it is. Instead, they're going to say, well, I don't have time. I don't need to read what somebody else wrote in a book and all that kind of nonsense. Okay, so we start out small, you know, and you read something, and then we build, a program. So start out small with something and then build on it. You know, because if you come with a big book immediately, you're gonna lose people because people not, you know, they don't want to do that. So we have to start off small so that people can come to understand. Oh, like in the community defense project I'm organizing here in Sacramento, we had a 3-page article on the Maroon communities, the Qualimbos in Brazil, the African and indigenous communities that united to fight the colonizers hundreds of years ago. We talked about those Maroon communities, and these folks were, because I'm telling them, like, what we're doing here is not new. We're descendants of that work. And they were fired up when they read that. We had a single mom in there and folks like that from the hood, and they were fired up. They were like, this is true. This is good. So then now, when I come now, they're like, what's next for political education? They're looking forward to it. And then we'll build a rotation so that other people can do it. So those are the kind of things you have to do to get it started. And we have to, you know, the criticism, self-criticism, you have to practice that. You have to practice that. And we have a workshop, I have a workshop from the book that I do to train people on how to effectively use criticism, self-criticism. So you can reach out, happy to go over it with you, how to utilize it. Criticism, self-criticism is not a check-in. It's a class struggle tool. So you have to, you know, practice how to use it. So happy to help people learn how to use it. It's critically important. And then, you know, your organization, do you have some sort of project you're working on? It could be something relatively simple. It could be passing out food bags. It could be doing break light checks. It could be having a community garden where you give away food. It could be self-defense training classes. You decide what it is, but you have to be doing something that materializes the work that you're studying about and talking about. Because Kwame Nkrumah was correct when he said, practice without theory is blind, and theory without practice is empty. So you have to have all of these components. And that's what the book is really trying to say, you all, that if we all started doing all of these things, I don't think anybody could argue that we would not be much farther along in our quest for freedom and justice. I don't think anybody can make an argument against that. Clearly, we would be much farther along, much, much farther along. And that's what we need to be able to do. So we're thankful to you for bearing with us these last 8 weeks as we went through all 8 chapters of a guide for organizing defense against white supremacist, patriarchal, and fascist violence. We want to encourage you to look at people who need to know this information and put them in touch with me, or put me in touch with them so that they can book me and we can do these workshops. That's what we want to do. And we need your help to do that. So please help us do that, to get these concepts in the book out there wider. We're doing the best we can on our own, but we need your help. So please help us do that. Some of you have helped. You know, I see some of you on here, like I see my friend Shan, very, very, very helpful in that regard. Thank you. But we need more people to do that. So help us do that. Let's get the word out so we can know, folks can know, and we can let people know about this, because this is going to save our lives, and do more than that, it's going to build on our lives. So next week, we're going to move back into regular programming where we're talking about topics that we bring up, different topic every week now that we're done with the book. So we want to invite you next Sunday, November 14th. We're going to talk about Colin Kaepernick's Netflix miniseries. We're going to talk about that. I wrote a review on it that has been widely, last time I checked, it had a couple thousand people had read it. And so we want to talk about that during this program of our Ancestors' Voices. Very good documentary, very good miniseries. He brought up some outstanding points. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about some of the things that Netflix would never allow to be discussed. But if you haven't seen it, you need to see it. It's, you know, one of the best things on television, in my humble opinion. And then we'll talk about, you know, how we build upon that. So we want to invite you out next week to participate with us on that. And please let people know. Please join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. A lot of people are doing that. A lot of people are participating in these programs and doing that. We want to continue to use this program as a vehicle to recruit. And you go to APRP-intl.org and you are given a brief summary. You can watch a video, and then it'll direct you to the person closest to you that's an organizer in AAPRP, and they'll reach out to you. And I know people are doing that because I get people all the time who come to me, and we have been able to bring many of those people into our process. So please do that. If you're African and you like what we're about, we encourage you to do that. And then abetterworld.me, www.abetterworld.me, that's my personal website. Donate when you go there. That would be great. Help us with this work. But all of these sessions are there, as well as the article I just mentioned. I wrote about the Kaepernick miniseries is there on the blog, and many other articles. So you can check that out. I also wrote a review on the Karen movie. That's there, so you can check that out. Encourage you to do that, tell people. And then I'm also an editor with hoodcommunist.org, which is a collection of African revolutionaries. We have writings from people from Cooperation Jackson, Republic of New Africa, the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, Black Alliance for Peace. All of these types of organizations write for Hood Communists. And I'm one of the editors and proud to do that. We have a weekly Telegram event. We had one just recently on Haiti last Thursday, so we won't do it this Thursday. We'll do it a week from this Thursday, but very valuable discussion on Haiti. So participate in that. You just download the Telegram app through your smartphone on your store through your smartphone, and it's free. You can listen to it. And then participate in these broadcasts we have every week from the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and tell people the Pontulip podcast on Mondays, Revolutionary African Women on the last Saturday, Forward Ever, Spotify, and then our comrades in New Mexico do the newscast every Thursday. They've been doing that about as long as we've been doing this one. This is our 85th consecutive week doing this broadcast. So check all of these out. Let people know, well, I can't make Sundays at 4 Pacific time. Well, you got all these other ones you tell them about. Okay, so check it out. And please continue to buy my book. As we've talked about, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. We just created a schedule for the community defense work we're doing here. So I need a lot of supplies. So, you know, the little money I get from the book, I priced the book so low, it's only $8. And the reason why I did that is because I'm not trying to make money off the book, but whatever little monies I do get from the royalties, I use them to buy the equipment I need to carry out this work. So we appreciate that. And if you know anything about the work we do, you'll know that. Like, I have community defense projects I'm working with right now all over the country. Like, there's 6 different ones. And, you know, this requires resources. So please support our work on all levels. It's good work. And you should support it because you say you're a good person, and we're good people, and we're doing good work. And so we need your support. Here we go in November, and you get all this reactionary propaganda. Support Black businesses. Look, to hell with that. Support revolutionary African organization. That's what you need to do, okay? You want to support African people, support independent revolutionary African organization. That's what you need to do. So that's what's important if you really want to support our people. You support a business, some of them are good. You know, I support them all the time. Some of them are good, but you might just be helping somebody put money in their pocket that ain't doing nothing for our people. Just as they look like us does not mean anything. Thank you for joining us today. Forward ever, backwards never. Come back next week. And just remember, we will not quit until we have one unified socialist Africa. We know that white supremacy is evil. It's got to go. We know patriarchy is evil. Got to go. Homophobia is evil. It's got to go. And capitalism, you already know, has got to go. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday afternoon.